Hi everyone, it's nice to see you today. My name is Kathie and I'll be your teaching artist today. So today we're going to talk about two different things and we're going to be playing some music. So normally I am a percussionist, I'm a musician, and as a percussionist I play basically any instrument that you would hit, scrape, or even tap. So some percussion instruments that you might be familiar with are things like the tambourine. Maybe you are familiar with a triangle, and maybe some of you have seen a glockenspiel before or a xylophone. And the most famous percussion instrument that you probably already know about is the drum set or drums. And that's what I normally play. But every now and then, as a percussionist, I'm asked to play something really weird and something that you might not think is an instrument. So, though that can be something like pieces of paper, it could be something like pot that you use to cook, or it could be something like dried beans or dried rice that are in jars. So these are items that you might have at home or that you might be able to find basically anywhere. And these items are called found sounds. So take a moment and think about what other things can you find around your house that you think you can make sounds with. Maybe that is something like chopsticks and you could hit them together to make a sound. Maybe you have a water bottle that you can use to make sound. So there's lots of different kinds of found sounds, and today you will get a chance to play some found sounds. So the other thing we're going to talk about today is improvising. So improvising is basically coming up with something on the spot. So today we're going to improvise using our different found sounds. So before we get started, we're going to take a moment and we're going to close our eyes and we're going to reflect on our day. So I want you to take 2 big breaths. Breathe in and breathe out. And breathe in and breathe out. So I want you to think about what was the best part of your day today. And then what didn't go as well today for you? I wanted to take this moment to remind you all that today's lesson will be an opportunity for you to be creative and have lots of fun. So please explore and be creative and perhaps come up with something brand new you've never done before. Today, you'll probably hear lots of kinds of music that you never heard before, and you might even question whether or not it's actually music. But I want you to keep an open mind and reimagine what you think music can be. All right, you can go ahead and open your eyes now. So before we officially get started, we need to gather all the materials that we need today. So the first thing you'll need is a blank piece of paper and a pen or a pencil or a marker. These are going to be our tools that we're going to use to take some notes during the lesson today. So keep this close to you, but just not in the way. The next thing we'll need is some paper. So here I have lots of different kinds of paper, and you might have something similar or something completely different, and that's totally okay. And we could use any kinds of paper. So you might notice that I have a glossier paper here. I have regular scratch paper, this kind of like gift wrap paper, and then a harder paper. So all papers are okay, and we'll go over later about the different sounds that you can make with different kinds of paper. The other found sound you'll need is pots and pans. You don't have to have both pots and pans. You can have just one, and that's totally okay. You might have bigger pots, bigger pans, or maybe even smaller. And we are going to explore the different sounds that we can make with these pots today. Okay. And then the last found sound you'll need are dried beans and dried rice. So you might have them in different containers. Here I have my dried rice in this plastic container. And here I have my dried beans in this glass container. You might have it in a bowl. It might be in a box, maybe even a plate. All of those are okay, as long as you have some dried rice and beans. And last but not least, the last thing you'll need is a hard surface like this one right here. something like a table, the floor, coffee table, or a countertop. We just need the space to play our different instruments today and use to take some notes. So make sure you have all your materials gathered. If you need some more time to gather your materials, go ahead and pause the video and restart the video once you have all your materials ready to go. All right, so let's start improvising with our very first found sound. Oh, one more thing. Before, I want you to be safe while you're exploring today. So there's lots of opportunities to do really fun and maybe crazy things, but I just want you to remember that you keep your own body safe and make sure that you don't hurt anyone around you or break anything around you. So be mindful and be safe. All right, now we're gonna get started. So grab your paper and let's talk about what different sounds can you make with paper. So the first most obvious one you might know about is crumpling paper. You might have done this before. Do you hear that really cool sound that it's making when you're crumpling it? So when we crumple it, it kind of reminds me of maybe a fireplace where wood is burning and it's crackling. Does that remind you of that? Another way that you can make some sounds is perhaps ripping the paper. You've probably done this before too. And you can rip at different speeds. So you can rip really slow, or you can rip really fast. You might notice that there's different sounds. And based on what kind of paper you have, so maybe you have a glossier paper like this, you'll notice that the sounds are a little different. So let's test it out. Let's try ripping this glossier paper. And then let's rip this regular paper. These actually sound quite similar, but glossier paper, it might not sound as different when you crumple it. When you crumple it, it's not as crispy as, say, this regular paper. So now I'm going to give you some time to explore the different types of paper that you have and try making different sounds. I'll do it with you, and you could try something different, or you could copy me if you run out of ideas to test. All right, let's try improvising on paper. So I'm going to start with something we've already done. We're going to crumple the paper. Now that I have a crumpled paper, what else can I do with this? Maybe I can scrape it across the hard surface to make this sound. And you can think of making patterns too. So can you hear my pattern here? All right, what else can you do? Maybe you can flick the paper. What else? Maybe you can wiggle the paper. This kind of reminds me of wind. Maybe I could put more pieces of paper together and try that. Now this really reminds me of wind. All right, so that was paper. So I hope you found some really interesting sounds. Now we're going to grab our blank piece of paper that we had put aside earlier that we said we're going to take notes with and a pen. And we're going to write down our favorite sound that we had on that we found with paper. So I'm going to put my favorite paper sound was flicking it. So I'm going to just write that down. And then what was your least favorite sound that you made with the paper? So my least favorite sound was making the wind sounds. I'm just going to write that down. This is just for you to remember. We're going to come back to this at the end of our lesson today. All right, take some time to write that. And if you need some more time to explore on paper, feel free to pause the video and restart and take some time to find new sounds that you come up with and then restart the video once you are ready. All right, let's put our paper aside for now. So our next instrument we're going to look at, use is our pots and pans. So what sounds can you make with pots and pans? maybe one that you're most familiar with or have even done yourself is flip these around and kind of use these as drums, right? So you can use your fingertips and hit the pot. If you have different sizes of pots and pans or just even a pot or a pan, you can see what different sounds that they make. So for my pot over here, you can hear it makes this sound. And my pan over here, it makes a higher sound. So test out different things that you can do. What else can you do? Maybe I can also flick it like this. Or what if I flicked it over here? Ooh, that's a cool sound. And something that you can do is maybe you have some chopsticks, maybe you have some forks, spoons, or whatever sort of silverware. You can use it and hit the the pot with it like it's a drum. And you can hit different parts of this pot too. Maybe you can hit the handle over here. You'll notice that it makes different sounds. And what about different sides? Maybe you could hit the side, maybe the edge, and then the center. So now it's your turn to explore on your pots and pans. So let's see what other cool sounds we could come up with. I'm gonna start with my pot. So I'm gonna start with my fingertips. Again, you could think of different patterns that you can make up. So now I'm gonna take my chopsticks that I have and try hitting different parts of the pot or pan. So I'm hitting the handle here and you'll see that it's like a rubber part. That's why it doesn't sound as loud. Now I'm gonna try here. Maybe I'm gonna pretend that this is a drum. Now, if you have a pot and a pan, if you have two, maybe you could try something different, like maybe rubbing them together. Maybe you could hit them together. Maybe you hit them this way. You'll notice that the different ways that you play these instruments all have different sounds. So there's lots of different sounds that you could come up with what you have in front of you. All right, so that is pots and pans. Again, if you need some more time to explore and test out your pots and pans, feel free to pause the video and spend some more time testing it out. And once you're ready to move on, you can restart the video. All right, let's set the pots and pans aside. And now let's grab our piece of paper and take some quick notes about our favorite sounds that we made on pots and pans. So my favorite sound that I made on pots and pans was hitting it like a drum. What was your favorite? Make sure you write that down. Hitting it. Okay. And my least favorite sound was when I rubbed it together. I didn't really like that sound, and that's okay. So remember to write down your favorite sound and least favorite sound that you found on the pots or pans. All right, once you're done taking those notes, go ahead and put it aside. And let's grab our last found sound, dried beans and dried rice. So like I talked about earlier in the beginning, that I have my dried rice in this plastic jar, and I have my dried beans in this glass jar. So you might have your dried beans and rice in different containers, or it might just be on the table or in a plate. Again, all those are fine. You could come up with lots of really interesting sounds based on what you have. So, and very obvious thing that I could do with the sound with what I have is I could shake it. It's like a shaker, right? Or a maraca, if you're familiar with that. So you might notice if you have both dried beans and dried rice, they make different sounds because rice is a lot smaller than the dried beans I have. The sounds are a little different. Plus, they're in different containers. The plastic container makes the sound a little bit softer. And then when I switch over to my glass jar with my beans in it, you'll hear that's a little louder. What else can you do? Maybe you can shake your jar or bowl with rice and beans in different directions. So you could go forward and back like this. Maybe you could go side to side. Or maybe you can even go in a circle like you're swirling it. What else can you do? So something about found sounds and the reason why we use found sounds is that oftentimes these found sounds can create sounds that we can't normally create with regular instruments. So for example, dried rice always reminds me of rain. You might hear the sound right now. Does it sound like rain or water flowing? You can't really create the same sound with, say, a violin or a piano. So that's why we sometimes use found sounds to create different and new sounds. So now it's your turn to play dried beans and dried rice. So see what other sounds you could come up with. And I want you to think outside of the box for this one. So I'm just rotating these right now. Really like this sound. Now, what if I want to open my jar? Maybe I want to try dropping these beans back into the jar and see what kind of sound that makes. This kind of reminds me of dropping maybe marbles in a bowl or something. You could also try dropping it on the table and see how different that sound sounds. Cool. Okay, what else can we make? Let's try shaking this again. Rotating. Maybe if you have a jar, you could flip it upside down and try rotating it a different way. So you see how I flipped my jar upside down and I'm spinning it on this side. It sounds different, right? Than this side. Let's try that with my jar of rice. Yeah, sounds a little different. And you could also play with speed. So maybe you shake it really fast, or maybe you could shake it really slow, and maybe you're rotating it. Makes different sounds, right? Lots of different things you can do. All right, great. So that's dried beans and dried rice. So grab your note-taking paper and let's take notes on what our favorite sound was with dried beans and dried rice. So my favorite was shaking it. I really like the sound of shaking the dried beans and dried rice. It reminds me of a shaker. Shake. And what's my least favorite sound? My least favorite sound was when I was dropping it into the jar. All right, so take a moment to think about what your favorite sound was and your least favorite sound was, and make sure you write that down. Okay, so now we're going to do something super crazy. We're going to combine a few of our instruments. So what do I mean by combine? So I'm going to take my pot, I'm going to take my dried beans and rice, and I'm going to play these two instruments together. So what can I do? I can take out my dried beans, and I can put it in my pot. So, I could drop it in. This creates a different sound. And then, or maybe I just put them all in. And what if I went like this? Maybe I can pretend I'm cooking. Ooh. All right, let's try combining our sounds. Don't forget, we also have paper. So Make sure you have your paper near you and try combining some sounds. Okay, so I'm going to try. I have my paper back out. Remember how we dropped the beans in different spots? So I dropped the bean here in the pot. What if I dropped it on a piece of paper? It's a lot quieter. It makes a different sound. And then I could drop it on the table, and that's really loud. Okay, what else can I do? Oh, maybe I can take my beans and I could put them on the paper and then kind of hold the beans with my paper, and I can shake this. Do you hear that? It's kind of like the shaker sound we made with the jar and the dried beans and rice, but it's a lot different since it's a paper holding it now. Now, how can I combine the paper and the pot? Ooh, maybe I can put the paper over the pot. And now this really reminds me of a drum. And I can hit the top of the paper. What else can you combine? All right. So what we just did was we used our different found sounds, our pots, our papers, and our beans, and we improvised new sounds on them. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get ready to play a game. So we're going to get set up for the game first. So make sure you have your 3 found instruments in front of you. So you have your paper, you have your pot or pan, and you have your dried beans and dried rice. So just make sure they're in front of you. And I want you to look back at that paper that you are taking notes on. So which one was your favorite instrument? If you have Post-it notes, you can label your instruments, your favorite to your least favorite, but if not, you can also place them in order. On the left side, you can have your most favorite, and the right side, you can have your least favorite. So for my number 1 most favorite instrument, I'm going to put a big 1 on this Post-it note, is I like the pots and pans. So I'm going to put it with my pots and pans right here. So my second favorite was the dried beans and dried rice. So I'm going to put that right there. My third favorite is the paper. Take a moment to do that and get set up. So what I have here are some cards with numbers on it. So you'll see I have a 1, 2, and a 3. So what these numbers are is that it tells you which instrument to play. So I'm going to show you a card at random. So say I show you 1. That means you are going to take your number 1 instrument and play some sounds with it. And then what happens when I show you the number 2? That means you'll play your second favorite sound. For me, that's my dried beans and rice. Remember that your sounds might be different than mine because your favorite instrument might be the dried beans or rice or paper. All that's okay. And if I show you 3, that's your third favorite. And there's one more card, but I think you all know what this one is. It says stop, and that just means the piece is over and there's no more sounds that are going to be made. All right, so let's play this game. Okay, let's start with 2. All right. So for me, my number 2 sound is my dried beans and rice. So what cool sound are you coming up with this time? You can do the same sounds you made earlier, or maybe you're coming up with brand new ones. Now, switch to your number 1 favorite instrument. For me, that's my pot and pan. And then let's switch to our number 3 favorite instrument. So for me, that's paper. I'm going to see if I could come up with a different sound. Maybe I could combine some things and rip it and then crumple it. And then rip the paper and crumple it. And then there's a bonus round. Here's a bonus round. What if I showed you 1 and 3? So that means combine your number 1 favorite and your number 3 instrument. So for me, that's my pot and then my paper. How do I combine it and make a new sound? Maybe I take my crumpled paper and rub the inside of the pot. So feel free to test something crazy you haven't done before or something you have already. And then the most bonus extreme round, all 3. See if you can combine all 3 different instruments together. So all the pots, pans, rice, and paper. So let me think. Maybe I can put my paper in my pot and then drop the rice in it. And stop. All right. So thanks for playing that game with me. I hope you found lots of new sounds and got a chance to combine all your instruments together and make the wildest sound ever. So I wanted to do a quick recap on everything that we talked about today. So the first thing we talked about are found sounds. Found sounds are basically everyday objects that you have at home or that you can find outside that you use as an instrument to make a really interesting and new sound. So the found sounds we used today were pieces of paper, pots and or pans, and dried beans and dried rice. We came up with lots of new sounds that you might have never heard from before. So after this lesson today, I want you to take some time and see what other found sounds you could come up with. Maybe if you go outside and you find some dried leaves, you could try crumpling them together. Maybe you have a water bottle and you could pretend the water bottle is a drum. And yeah, lots of different things. And the other thing we talked about is improvising. So improvising is basically coming up with something on the spot and make it up. So that's basically what we did today. We improvised on our found sounds. So we made up new sounds, we made up new patterns, and came up with lots of new sounds today. So thank you for joining me today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.